And this morning, we are going to talk to Caleb and McKenna Kramer around love. Now, Caleb and McKenna's story isn't necessarily like the white picket fence story, but their story includes some, they have their own past, and their feelings of love haven't always been what you think they should be, but God has done a really great work in them, and we thought their story would encourage you. Well, Caleb, why don't we start with you? You guys doing okay? Take a deep breath. I know, like all these people love you though, just remember that. Caleb, did you feel much love in your family growing up?
So I'll start towards the beginning. Growing up, I had a big family. We grew up I have 9 kids in my family, and then my mom and dad. Yeah. But we grew up really poor. Grew up in a trailer, and my mom homeschooled all of us throughout portions of our life. I was homeschooled until my senior year. Then I went to high school at a public school. But starting off at a young age, my parents did not have the best relationship. There was a lot of arguing, fighting, and then also physical abuse, as well as other types of abuse in the home. But growing up, so we dealt with that, and then towards my teenage years, when I was around 16 years old, it escalated to the point where they ended up getting divorced. During that time, I was not feeling much love. I did grow up going to church. My mom would take us to church. My dad didn't really go that often. But yeah, around 16 years old is when they started going through a divorce. At that time, I was working about 30 minutes away from our house. So I moved out of my house and just lived at friends' houses, living on like their floor or whatever, as we went through that.
So in the midst of all that hard, then you magically meet McKenna. Mm-hmm. And tell us how you felt about love for her and from her. What did that look like?
So that was a little bit later on. We met, so I went through high school. I finished up my senior year just living with friends. At that time in my life, it was more, I wasn't really following God. I knew him in my heart, but I was partying, drinking, doing drugs, stuff like that. And then after graduation, I moved back in with my dad for a few months, and that was following the divorce, so it was just me and my dad at that point. Other kids there was some with my mom, some were off on their own. But I lived with my dad for a couple months, and I moved up to Grand Rapids and started a job there. And right at the time when I moved is when I met McKenna, and we started talking. And I had dated in the past, but in my heart, I knew what I was looking for in a spouse or for my, my wife, future wife. So as we started talking, I knew, it doesn't take me long to make a decision, So we actually got...
you knew what you were looking for, and you found it.
So we started talking, and 3 months later, we got engaged, and then 3 months after that, we got married.
And then you rode off into the sunset, never to have a problem again. Yeah. So McKenna, as you're part of this story, obviously, what expectations about love did you bring into this relationship?
So I grew up in brokenness also. I grew up to a single mom, and eventually my mom ended up getting married, but not to my biological dad. So then after that, I gained 2 dads, and I gained 2 moms. And from those marriages came 11 children. And there was 8 on one side and 2 on the other side. And so I spent my childhood kind of going back and forth between the 2 houses. And my mom became a believer. And so in my mom's household, there was a lot of talk of Christ. We were homeschooled, and there was our faith was built in that household, but in the other household, they did not know Christ. And so I kind of jumped between both homes, and there was naturally some confusion on my part, where I knew that I was loved. I knew that I was loved in both of those homes, but having an extra set of parents that did not live together was confusing at times too. And jumping between both houses, it got difficult for me, and sometimes I didn't always feel love. I sometimes felt like I was on the outside a little bit, but I also knew Christ at a young age, but I didn't really claim it, I would say, until a few years after we were married. And when we got married, like he said, it was really quick. It was like we both knew. I was like, he's the one for me. He loves Jesus. Like, I know I'm going to marry him, and I wanted to get married young. I always dreamed of having a family and getting married and being a stay-at-home mom, and I got everything that I had wanted at that point. And so my expectation was that everything would be great. I'd have a lot of joy and it'd be happiness from here on out, and there wouldn't be a ton of difficulty. Even though I did grow up with that brokenness, I was still feeling optimistic, I guess. I was looking forward to that life in marriage, but I married someone who is the exact opposite of me. And so that posed a few difficulties in its own throughout our marriage, and things that we have had to grow from.
So sparks flying went to sparks flying, from one kind of sparks flying to another kind of sparks flying.
Yes.
So hearing your story and your backgrounds, many could be like, hey, you had challenges growing up in different ways, both of you. That could be a recipe for ongoing challenge, brokenness, and maybe worse. What has made the difference for you guys?
So I'd say for me growing up, I didn't really have a consistent person that taught me how to be in a relationship or how to love. So after we got married, I think we just worked with each other. We're very open with each other, and we're able to talk. If one of us is feeling hurt, we can talk to each other and not get upset with each other. We can talk through it, which I think is helpful for me because I don't know, we're not perfect. I don't know. I'm just figuring it. Yeah.
They look like the perfect couple, don't they? Right?
We're figuring it out as we go. So, we just take it day by day and try to figure it out.
How has Christ made a difference in your marriage?
So, I think Christ has made a difference so early on, I would say in my heart, I learned early on that everything's not in my control, so I've been able to just put it in God's hands. I don't really get spun up by day-to-day things that are out of my control. It's in God's hands, and God has a plan. And I think that has helped us because she is a little more where she wants to be in control.
I like control.
Yeah.
Thanks for your answer.
So I think we balance each other out in that way, and just I can be it's okay. Don't worry about it. God has a plan, sort of thing. And I think that is one way that I see he has showed us love and how he can help our marriage.
McKenna, how has Christ affected you?
I feel like because we've been on this journey, we both knew Christ young, we have had to reclaim that faith, though. We've had to grow in that faith. We've had to make it our own. And we both grew up with it, being present and being there, but we've had to make it our own. And we've had to claim it. And we've had to learn from Christ how to make a marriage work. And we have learned that we have to do hard things. We have learned that, God did hard things for us. He sent his son to die for us, even though he maybe didn't want to do that, but he did that anyways. And so he has been my example, and I think our example, in a time when we needed him, when we needed help. We've gotten into arguments. There's been times where we thought, should we continue our marriage? Should we even keep going with this? But we both know that we want to fight for this and that we love each other and we want to be an example for our girls and we want them to see Christ through us. And so I think that that has kind of helped us do these really painful and difficult things and have these conversations. And Christ has been the center of it because he's been part of our journey all along.
That's sweet. Thank you for being honest that Jesus didn't make your marriage perfect, but he gave you the example of love, and he's what guides you, drives you, gives you delight. As you delight in him, your delight for each other grows. Lastly, what would you say to those who are listening, whether they're at home or here, who might be struggling with love, maybe struggling with loving others, struggling with feeling loved? How would you encourage them today?
I would say that something that I have learned is that love is definitely an action. It is not a feeling. And sometimes you don't feel like loving, but Christ loves you. And so in my life, I have learned that there comes pain with confrontation. It's awkward, it's painful, whether you're confronting your spouse or confronting a friend or a family member, it's awkward and it's painful. But in my experiences, I have learned that it is less painful to just jump in and have those conversations than it is to carry that grudge or that hate or whatever you feel towards that other person. I have felt like in situations where I haven't been able to resolve things, that's where more pain comes from in my experiences.
You have anything you want to say to those to be an encouragement?
I would just say that have the conversations that need to be had, and just trusting God that he has a plan, and that God has you. He has your back.
Why don't let's just pray. As a church, I want to pray for us and for those who are struggling with love. Father, thank you for the work that you have done in Caleb and McKenna. Thank you for revealing Christ to them and showing them Christ's ongoing love for them. And I pray, God, for those who are listening, whether here or at home, if they're struggling with feeling loved, would they know the love of Christ that surpasses knowledge, that they would be filled with all the fullness of God as they become aware of all that Christ has done for them. And if they're struggling to love, God, I pray that you give them grace. Point them to the great lengths that Christ went for them, and be an encouragement to them. Bring others around them. And I pray, God, for those who feel alone, whether single or married, Lord, they're not alone, because Jesus, you promised that you'd never leave us or forsake us. You see us through till the end. And we just thank you for that. We ask all this in Jesus' name. And we say, amen. Thanks, guys.